The first eukaryotes were absolute freaks. Do you understand? They were freaks. The first land creatures were absolute monsters. Do you understand? They were monsters. They were unnatural by the perception of the water living species, right? So whatever comes next will of course seem unnatural. But if the flame is like the main thing, then it would seem stewarding the flame for as much time as we have would actually be rather important for all kinds of value we presently know and all forms of value to be blossomed forth.
Thank you for tuning in to Circling Dialogos and my conversation with Dan Faggella. So I think you're really going to enjoy this wild conversation and the implications of it. So I'm just going to read a little bit of Dan's bio, so you have a sense of his background. So Dan Faggella is founder of Emerge Artificial Intelligence Research and is best known for being an unbiased voice covering the applications and implications of artificial intelligence in industry and society. Dan regularly speaks for audiences of businesses and government leaders with a focus on the critical near-term implications of artificial intelligence across major sectors, including presentations for World Bank, the United Nations, Interpol, and global pharmaceutical and banking companies. Tens of thousands of business people tune in weekly to hear Daniel's interviews with top AI executives and researchers in Emerge's AI in Industry podcast. Daniel has given presentations on AI and emerging technologies at TEDx events at nearly all the Ivy League universities and some of the largest artificial intelligence events. He has written for and been featured in many of the world's best known technology and business publications, including the Harvard Business Review, TechCrunch, Pew Research Center, Xconomy, and many more. So as you can hear, Dan is right in the middle, and I would say is one of the central figures in the middle of AI and the implications of AI in the future. Now, where I connect with Dan is a little bit more on his freaky side, because really underneath it all, he is fascinated at the implications and the deeper questions that the notion of artificial intelligence brings to the foreground. You know, we are, and I think Daniel would agree with me here, we live in an extraordinary time in which such like deep perennial questions that have always been at the heart of being alive and being human, such as what is being, what is consciousness, what is intelligence, right? These have been mysteries and perennial questions in the very heart of our existence as human beings for as long as we've been human beings. But we live at a time where artificial intelligence and the possible implications of it bring these questions into practical relevance, which leads to just the possibility, even if none of it comes true, just the fact that it occurs possible for us for something like intelligence or consciousness to emerge out of something other than organic life, if you will, is astounding. So we go deep into that question and explore the implications of it, the sources of it, and some of the moral and ethical questions that artificial intelligence brings to the foreground. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. He's extraordinary, he's super bright, and he's a deep guy. And this will be like the second time I've talked with him. However, I think we are going to be having many conversations going on into the future. That's what I hope for, anyways. If you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel to get all the updates on all the future conversations and videos that I put up. If you like this conversation, please let us know by pressing the like button, and please leave a comment and share this with your friends. We like to live on the deeper side of things. So please spread the word, spread the depth. And I'm also available if you want to hire me as your coach or consultant. I've been working with people one on one and in groups for over 30 years, and professional, corporate level, and individuals. I've worked with all kinds of people. So go ahead and email me. My email is below, and we'll get together and we'll talk about what's possible. If you're interested in my work that I've developed with circling, all the links for courses that I offer through my company, the Circling Institute, all those links are below. Thank you and enjoy this conversation. All right. Welcome, my friend.
Glad to be here, Guy.
We just officially hit the record button. I've never found that point where I'm ready to hit the record button. I always, at some point, I just have to say, fuck it, and just record, whether or not I'm ready or not.
I do.
so,
Yeah.
so I just want to give a second just to start off and just introduce you a little bit. Like we met, I met you through Eric, who invited
Yes.
you onto the radio show that Eric and I host. And as you were coming on, I had listened to a bunch of podcasts that you were in, and then like got totally like sucked into the vortex of your podcasts. And I would say that the sense that I've gotten from you so far is that, at least in my world, you've kind of really brought my attention to this kind of place where like something like the future and the present are intersecting technologically in terms of AGI and the implications of that. Now, I think I've heard people. I think the word post-humanist um, be associated with you, and I think I want to clarify something because my sense of you is it's not like I've heard post-humanist, that word used for people who were like think that's a really good idea, are all about that. They have a tendency to be pretty autistic, that kind of thing. My sense with you is actually it's not even like you think it's a good idea or not. It's more like you're looking into the future and you're going, no, this is happening. Post-human intelligence is happening. And I would say, if I were to guess, the question you're answering or that's steering you is what does doing good mean? What is a good outcome given that?
I would say that's accurate. Would you want me to clarify just what
Yeah,
you just
please,
said? Yeah,
please.
sure. So, I don't have any ists, post-human ist or transhuman ist or,
Yeah,
not. I don't think having an ist is bad. I just don't. I don't have one. I have my current best ideas, and then I'll kind of evolve those ideas. Like, Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't wake up every morning and say, "I'm a transcendentalist." Like somebody came up with that and kind of created a bounding box of that, and then it had connotations that like he may or may not have even actually liked that much, and
yeah.
his ideas continued to develop, um, and I very much feel the same way. So yeah, I think, well, on two fronts here. I think there is a really likely inevitability that the bubbling process from worm to man
Mm,
will continue in substrates different than guanine and will continue in shapes and forms different than Homo sapiens sapiens.
mm,
And that it seems to me that all torches are temporary. Maybe some last longer than others. The horseshoe crabs have had a pretty long shake, but at some point, right? I don't know the year, but at some point there won't be any more horseshoe crabs. I don't make the rules. I'm just telling you I'm just telling you what's up.
yeah,
I'm just here to tell you what's up.
yeah.
So, um, torches seem to be temporary.
Mhm,
There seems to be a value in this blossoming, this life staying alive, life fighting to find a way to stay alive, seem to conjure sentience, at least in so much as vertebrates experience it. And sentience seems to conjure, from the early rats and rodentia
mhm.
to around the time of the dinosaurs to us, enthusiasm, romantic love, artistic expression, all kinds of interesting things that we happen to value a lot. Now, of course, we also have heartbreak and physical pain and other kinds of bad qualia, but it seems as though that which is good has had a wider birth to be good, as life itself has had a wider birth to be life.
Mhm.
Um, and it seems as though if any value is to exist, then life itself is to keep burning and unfolding. Because if you don't value that very, very highly and you value some little niche interest, but then the system itself crumbles, well, the system is what predicates any value to be emergent. So there is a predominant interest in the flame itself being alive. So it isn't that I have an ardent interest to move beyond man. And in fact, my position is quite conservative. I don't think we should jump into AGIs tomorrow at all. I think some degree of merger and symbiosis are somewhat inevitable and probably rather good, so that we don't create a Disneyland with no children in Nick Bostrom's terms, which would basically mean some giant supermind that's completely unconscious and maybe it's just a brute optimizer for something. It doesn't continue to do this creative self-creation that biological life does. Doesn't have the inner experience that we vertebrates, or some of us vertebrates, majority it seems, might have. Um, so yeah, it, it's more like this seems to be the case. It seems to me that the flame is moving through torches, and it seems as though stewarding that flame in terms of its continued trajectory through new mediums and modes, as it has always done, right? The first eukaryotes were absolute freaks. Do you understand? They were freaks. The
Yeah.
first land creatures were absolute monsters. Do you understand? They were monsters. They were unnatural by the perception of the water living species, right? So whatever comes next will of course seem unnatural. But if the flame is like the main thing, then it would seem stewarding the flame for as much time as we have would actually be rather important for all kinds of value we presently know and all forms of value to be blossomed forth, the vast majority of which hath not blossometh. So this is the hypothesis I operate in. Yeah.
Right, totally. And would you say that kind of, at least it strikes me that one of the characteristics that defines where we're at is we're the, like in some sense, we're the first creatures to come onto water that then looks back and at the flame itself and then has thoughts about it and can go, that's good or that's not good or whatever that is. It's like there's this other, and thus this conversation, right? We're looking back on it. That is that kind of one of the things that defines where we're at, you think?
And here's what I would say. It strikes me that over the course of the bubbling up from wiggling guanine, not even in a cell, I don't even know if guanine wiggles on its own. I presume it doesn't, but whatever. Some early components of pre-cellular, I don't even know if you could call it life. The definitions get real spooky when you get low. You know what I mean? They get real spooky. But let's call it something self-organizing that wasn't yet a cell. From that to you and I, there have been many paradigmatic, massively important shifts. And there's many different theorists that have said, okay, here's a line, here's a line, here's a line, and drawn individual lines. And some people draw different lines than other people in terms of what was most important. As humans, obviously, to be self-serving, because of course, we would want everything to be relevant to us. I mean, we would obviously want to be the most important thing until the end of time. In fact, what we would wish is that until the very heat death of the universe, the highest agent of moral value and of volition, until the very heat death, would be Homo sapiens sapiens. And of course, we almost take for granted, of course, it would be because of the very particular specialnesses of ours. But regardless, what do we got? We got this pop of cortex that seems to allow us to think and communicate and do a bunch of wacky stuff that other species couldn't do. But there have been other pops, my good sir. Some of those pops involve the wildly pro-social, expansive empires of insects that were so different from individual algae or something. Some of those pops involved the emergence of sentience, potentially in early vertebrates, potentially in other branches of life like the cephalopods or whatever. Some of those early pops could have been the absorption of mitochondria, which we presume was some kind of another organism, which then became the powerhouse of the cell, as we all learn in middle school. These, to say which of those pops, like from a cosmic standpoint, when the end of time comes, to know which of those was actually like the real deal, we don't really know. Now, you and I, we are at the cusp of what feels like a pop for our species, and it be a significant one. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
it be one of a great many pops. And
yeah,
I suspect the popping don't gonna keep happening.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
don't gonna keep happening.
Totally. So
Yeah.
there's a real emphasis, and this is something I've seen like a through line of everything that I've heard of you having conversations and stuff, is that it seems like there's a real emphasis that you make a point of, right? Which is going something like, there's something not, remember, yeah, this is really, really incredible, but there's nothing special about us in particular, right? When you look at the wider scheme, Like I notice you come back to that quite a bit. Like, am
Yeah,
I perceiving that right?
I think you are. Although I would say, um, I think there are like so. There's different ways you could define special.
Yeah.
So there's a definition of special that I believe is actually immoral. So let me articulate it for you. I believe it is immoral to say that in the great flame of life, from wiggling guanine to us right now, we are the purpose of that whole process. That process ought be stopped. It ought be slowed. It ought be hampered in any future blooming if that blooming not serve our form as it is. In other words, the entire process of life of which we are part has never served a single purpose or had a goddamn pinch of relevance and there's no good it can do outside of the good to Homo sapiens sapiens. This definition of specialness, I would actually call immoral. IMM, immoral. Now there's another kind of specialness that I would consider to be a rightful observation, a logical observation. Here's that definition.
Yeah.
We, as a species, have developed, so potentia is the total set of powers that permit a thing to not die. Life seems to have expanded potentia, Guy, in my conception. This is a Spinozan term. So the total set of powers was basically biologically determined stuff. We've done this wacky thing where we have cultural potentia because of language. Like we've somebody knew had to make an arrowhead when this guy was born, and he didn't have to invent that arrowhead or have it encoded like a spider and had to make a web encoded in his genes. We just had it, right? Language, tools, many things, cultural potentia. Then technological potentia. We're speaking here on a Zoom call. We've got all this sand dancing around in these computers doing magical things at our will. So we've opened up magazines of potentia, and we are on the cusp of what we know of presently in our ignorance. We are at the cusp of the set of cosmic powers on the planet that we were born on, in so much as we can tell. This is relevant because we serve a more important role in stewarding the flame because we can recognize it, and because our own flame, our own total set of potentia, is monumental compared to the next set of species below us. So we are special in that we are a crucial conduit. We are also, I think, particularly morally valuable. If I had a bus with no brakes and I got to hit a deer or a human, I'm hitting a deer. Not even because it's like I'm a speciesist, but because the total creative ability and the knowledge of self and the degree of suffering capable within these two entities is a categorically different. So we carry a heck of a lot of flame on our torch and
Yeah.
enough to maybe be good stewards of it. This strikes me as unquestionably special in so much as we can tell. But the special to the point where the flame itself ought never jump to other torches,
Yeah.
the special to the sense that all future flame ought to be servant to our torch. In
Yeah.
my opinion, marriage eternally, not marriage for 2 more decades, marriage eternally to any one torch is scorn for the flame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marriage to any one torch is scorn for the flame. The original archaea that we evolved from, the original proto reptiles we evolved from, those forms are not here anymore. And it's okay because they blossomed into other things. And I think there's symbiotic and merger scenarios, none of which do I advocate rushing to them recklessly. I think we should accept change, but also be cautious about how we do it. But understand it's not all about opposable thumbs as main character until the literal heat death of the universe.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Totally. So it's interesting. It really strikes me. So like so what you're sensing is, and that's that appreciate you clarifying it. Yeah. That is the through line that I think I've been hearing is that, yeah, there's a novelty, right? For the part of the flame that the current form, the threshold, as you were talking about, that we're existing in, there's a novelty that we possess,
Wonderful,
right?
wonderful.
However, the to confuse the the flame itself with the flame holder is a pretty big mistake, a pretty big error. And what's interesting is it's what strikes me is like it, it's the very novelty of that beholding that mistake that is that grants our ability to not do that as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
really
it does.
it's kind of interesting, and that's where it seems like it strikes me as if I were to feel into I don't know if I, if I were to be so bold as to say, is it like if I were to feel into the impulse to have these kinds of conversations, right? It seems like the impulse is dialed into that, right? Is that we can, in some sense, in this beholder, right, of the flame, like we can go one direction or another. Therefore, like the dialogue about the way that we do it and how we do it and all that kind of stuff is like, is perhaps the difference that makes the difference.
My basic argument for why this is crucial to talk about. Now, I also focus on things that are a bit more normal. So one of the very normal things would be the prevention of the birth of some what I would call an unworthy successor, some kind of unconscious optimizing crusher AGI machine built for military purposes or otherwise, which somehow outsmarts us, squashes us, but does not bloom and blossom in the way that biological life has done.
Yeah.
It squashes actually that process. It's not actually carrying the flame. So my advocacy here, so I focus on prevent the flame from going out stuff,
Yeah.
but I also focus a good deal on let us really pay attention to what the flame is because we want to make sure it survives. So I, Guy, am not smart enough to be the one to crack what sentience is or the particular nuances of where intelligence emerges from or autopoiesis emerges from in biological systems. But I interview Michael Levin, I interview Ed Boyd, and I interview, the people that are, the Yoshua Benjios of the world. So, your computer science, your bio, your neuro. And I conjure ideas from them and aim to share, proliferate, and hopefully generate more enthusiasm around those ideas. Because if we are dealing with all these waves of creative destruction from nuclear stuff with Russia to building AGIs we might not be able to control, can we at least make sure if our shape doesn't come out the back end? Here's the shape. I got a shape right now. If
Yeah.
this shape doesn't come out the back end, does the flame still come out the back end? I think we must ardently understand what it be
Yeah.
and ensure that we can manifest it in different substrates, and that must start with conversation.
Yeah.
And so my job is to catalyze that cosmic conversation because I don't think back in the day, Guy, you used to have a choice to lie to yourself that all is not process. So if you were born in the year 10,000 BC, social structures, the food you ate, nothing would change for you and the next, 100 generations or whatever the fuck. If you were born in 1150 AD in Europe or something, you might see some social structures change, but tech doesn't change. Nothing else really changes. If you were born in 1950, now you've seen social structures change, technology change, a lot of things change. If you're born now, I think you'll see this shape start to change. Brain computer interface, AI immersion, biotech. I think so. In other words, Guy, it's always been a lie that all is not process. It's always been a lie. But we've been able to live with that lie because functionally it was the same. But I suspect that it will no longer be something we can lie about. And if it all be process, is the process headed in the right direction? Is it stewarding forward that which is valuable? Let us define and understand that which is valuable. This is what I call for.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just striking to me that I notice as I'm whatever degree I am grokking what you're understanding. I feel my experience is I feel like it's like my right butt cheek is in the kind of total, like the total nature is going its direction, and my left one is in like the moral question. Like there's this there's this kind of interesting straddling going on as I'm grokking what you're saying. I find myself in both worlds at the same time and kind of honing in on it. It's really interesting.
What are the moral questions that come to mind for you, just out of curiosity? Because I think it ties into inherent moral questions. So I think we should all be thinking about both. What comes up for you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think I think we're in a time right now that is just incredible, right?
Yep.
Whether or not how it turns out, who knows? But either way, it's incredible because like these perennial questions that have been with like with man the moment he birthed consciousness, right? These deeper questions about what is consciousness, what is being, right? Like how is there anything rather than nothing? These and then all of the normative questions about the good, what is good, all these kinds of things. These are perennial questions that presuppose our very existence, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Yet like there's something about the advent of AGI and all these things that make these very abstract questions, right, be have like immediate practical relevance. I think it's like
Yes. Yes. Yes.
you know the horizontal and the vertical are actually touching in our time, right?
Here's the way I explain it, Guy.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right, by the way. So, um, when you believe that your lily pad is made of concrete, then talking about future good possible lily pads is an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
Because when the night comes, you can go to sleep on your lily pad, wake up, and it is concrete. It'll always be there.
Yeah.
But when your lily pad when more and more lily pads are sinking and more are emerging, now to ask what is a good direction across the pond? What is progress in the grand process of us of movement of which we are part? Now it is a serious question. So
Yeah.
so in the halls of Kodak back in 1989, they played with digital photography as, yeah, what might it be good for? What might be the cases where people would want this electronic kind of photography? They didn't say, they didn't say, guys, there's a chance that within one generation we'll go from 100% film photography to less than 1%. What does the purpose, the value of Kodak in the world, how could it bloom and be more, even if film was no longer part of what we were doing? Guy, if they asked it that way, they would have thought more ardently about the required changes of the paradigm shifts that they were facing. But Guy, they didn't. They played with the idea like a toy. They
Yeah.
played with it like a thought experiment. In my opinion, Guy, you do not take it seriously unless you understand the condition of your own lily pad. And I
Yeah.
will not say we are certain to be eviscerated and attenuated in the near term, but the chances feel good enough where we ought to be talking about it. And
Yeah.
and so I agree with you.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. I'm aware of the time. I know you have something at one, right?
No, no, it's a full 35 minutes from now, so
Oh,
we're
okay.
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good. Yeah, that's great. I'm just curious, like these two directions that it seems like it can go, right? Like we'll say the carrying of the flame, we'll call that the good direction.
Sure.
The pure optimization, unconscious, like calculating machine,
Yeah.
right? Is is the not good direction.
The unworthy versus the worthy
Yes.
successor, yes.
Yes. The
And,
word
and, and a successor could be a collection of intelligence. It's not just one thing. But yes, there's a scenario where intelligence blooms into something splendid with more sentience and autopoiesis, or where that stuff gets crushed. So you are right. I think that that feels to be the most consequential dichotomy that we face. Yes.
Yeah, totally, totally. This is why I want to send you some stuff on Heidegger because I think you guys are
Yeah.
on the same beat. Um, the right now, bringing it a little bit more into the practical dimension of what we're looking at right now in our times. Like when you look on the horizon of like everything from Chat GTP to Levin's work to all the things, right, that are heading us into the future. Like where are some of the places that you're seeing it go south and where it's going north? Like what's
Yeah.
your estimation?
Sure. I think uh you know, in general, I dislike that it seems like on the road to AGI, we've made a what smells to me like a lot of progress. And on the road to understanding even a little bit of what sentience is, essentially pretty close to none. Um, Maybe that's too much of a downplay, but to be frank, I unfortunately think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
10 years ago, 14 years ago, when I got started on this stuff, I would have presumed neuro and AI wouldn't be neck and neck, but it wouldn't be 99 to, 0.001 in terms of like resource allocation, felt tangible progress in the world, right? The brain computer interface stuff 11, 12 years ago in my home state of Rhode Island at Brown University was actually really not that far behind anything going on now in brain computer interface. There were people scooping pudding and eating it with a robotic arm who were paralyzed with a plug in the top of their head, um, 12 years ago, in my home state, and that really, like, you would think, okay, well, maybe in 12 more years, you'd have some new set of power, but you kind of don't. So I don't like that scenario because I think we're understanding some components of what smells like intelligence with AGI. But I think it feels ungrounded from something that might be sentient and model these what we've seen in biology, which is this opening up of potential over time, not just brute optimizing for one thing. So that feels rough. I like that there's people like Ed Boyden and Michael Levin and other people working ardently on some of these areas. I don't like, I guess, how tragically underfunded they are compared to these AGI efforts. But again, I understand economic motives. Like if you can create the machine that can do all virtual jobs, like you're worth $100 trillion, and that's that, right? And you're the most powerful country in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the financial motives make sense, but it doesn't make me happy. I have seen at the UN General Assembly, I've been involved in the intergovernmental space for 7 or 8 years, with the OECD and the UN both for 7 or 8 years. Been at UN headquarters a couple times. The last time was at the General Assembly this year. A good friend of mine was part of the catalyzing force to get Bengio into the General Assembly to talk to folks about loss of control and these bigger AGI risks. Most of the people in the intergovernmental world, just like the enterprise world, really are totally ignorant about the big picture. But there is, I think, more openness to loss of control as a category of risk, more openness to coordination and avoiding military arms races being something we should be thinking seriously about. Even in the stodgiest halls where I've seen almost no progress on those discussions, I now see some momentum in those discussions, and this heartens me. So the possibility for some degree of standards or policy or what have you to at least bound the runaway worst cases feels like in the last 2 years we've made some progress. But in many other regards of understanding and proliferating the flame itself, I think we have essentially no real focus. And so that tends to be where I put my time because I think we're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, okay, got you. So you're actually like you're in the bowels of some of the policy conversations
Yeah.
and the governmental stuff. That's a big part of what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I don't talk about the big post-human picture there. I talk mostly about just
Yeah,
more practical
yeah.
AI and then leaning into AGI coordination. For years and years and years, it was inching closer to AGI, and it's only been the last 2 years I've been able to say the word AGI without getting kicked out. But I've always been proxying towards it in every presentation I've given in the intergovernmental context for the better part of a decade.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. And it's interesting because I just had Eric and I just had a conversation with Vervaeke where we went really deep with him on intelligence, and he wrote a book called that summarizes a lot of his ideas called Mentoring the Machines. And
mentoring.
yeah,
Okay.
and so I would this is really reducing his summarizing is what I think he's thinking, which made a lot of sense to me. Is he's like, look, it, for us to kind of have a chance, right, with something like super intelligence, right, in some sense, we have to be part of the mentoring process of it, right? um, that it's and so he really thought that he thought that the real direction where like real and genuine advancements in intelligence is going to come from is through this merging, like through the merging of biology and
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
right? And it's like when we get to the point where we can actually in some sense generate artificial life, um, that we can be part of the process of becoming of that thing, and it's being part of
Yes.
that process of becoming is where he thinks that flame can go forward. Now,
I
yeah,
concur monumentally. I concur monumentally. It,
yeah,
it strikes me that to just have 1,000 football fields with the best generation of NVIDIA chips and give them all 1 million robotic instantiations from femtobots to fighter jets to, hominoids or whatever, and just to say, well, if we just flick it on, surely it will only be a boon to the cosmos. Surely it will be conscious. I think that's a much too big of a dice roll. I think that there's a necessity for symbiosis and merger in order to ensure, ship of Theseus wise, that we transfer some of the creative and sentient uh, essence of ourselves and
Yeah.
get a deeper understanding and proxying of it and merge it into those systems, I would concur. I don't think that just let it rip. If it's got enough flops, let it rip, and it'll be a boon to the cosmos. I do not believe this, but I also believe, and I don't know what his take is here. If we become part of that process, we are probably then not us, and the future is not a main character Homo sapiens sapiens game
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Um, how honest is he about that?
I think he would say, my sense is he'd say that, well, first of all, it would be a co-development, right? And I think that's where he would probably come into agreement with that in the sense of, yeah, like first of all, we already know how to do that because we create agents. Like we're when we have kids, right? We know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And that is it, the most immersive experience in the world, right? Like it's a lot of effort. It takes your whole being. You transform in the process, right? Like all that stuff that everyone kind of knows who's had kids, right? Goes
Yep.
through. So if we think about like, and in some sense, in some ways that we anticipate when we have kids is we want them to be better off than we were. So in some sense, there is in our machinery, right? We have the machinery to be able to foster at least the desire to have children go beyond us. So
Yeah.
if you exap that machinery up into another level where we're actually creating another kind of life form, right? I think what he would say is that it seems to be necessitated as part of the process is where we begin to up level our sense of what we are, right? In
Yeah.
the process of creating something beyond ourselves. That would almost be a religious process in some regards, right?
Well, we're defining what value itself is. Now, I think it's going to have to potentially have us move beyond just bearded guys in the clouds and whatever. It's
Yeah.
going to have to really be like what is valuable. Um, is actually going to be something we have to grapple with. But I'm not totally convinced that the bulk of humanity is going to be all that interested in that. I think most people probably do want whatever the particular myth is, but I do think it will awaken a lot of religious stuff in us. I simply also suspect
Yeah.
as we define ourselves differently, think about ourselves differently,
Yeah.
it doesn't strike me that every single person, maybe even me, will really have that much to give after a certain threshold. So it'll be a co-creation. Here's my question. And for how long do you suspect it'll be a co-creation? That's
Yeah.
my question.
That's a great
Do
question.
you understand? Actually, that's like a pretty honest question to ask, isn't it? Isn't it honest?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh totally.
Because there's a so imagine ourselves a quadrant.
Yeah.
There's an article called just danfagel.com/merger that talks about this. But imagine a quadrant. Um, Bad for humans, good for humans.
Yeah.
Bad for the entire process of life, good for the entire process of life. At the top right, good for both parties. Good for the process of life, good for humans. This is called a contribution. We, in our participation, are adding to its powers, it adding to ours, our powers, and maybe even our pleasure. If it is bad for humans, but it helps the process of life, we are now a sacrifice. We're not enjoying that it's zapping into our brains and sucking out all of our knowledge and like just using our part. We're not enjoying it, but
Yeah.
the process of which we are part is becoming stronger. Am I saying I want that? No, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying it's fucking possible, dude.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, it's bad for the process of life, but it's good for humans. We
Yeah.
would call this a freeloader situation. Imagine if every day you had to wake up, Guy, and for the first 2 hours of your day, or even the first 20 seconds of your day, any appreciable amount, you had to go specifically coddle and care for a particular species of roly-poly bug. And if you wanted to get a new job, you would need to check to see if the impact of that job would negatively affect the roly-poly bugs. If you want to have another kid, or if you want to go on a vacation, you always got to be you have to take their interest in consideration for all of your choices. It might only be a little bit of your mind, but you never get to not consider them. You
Yeah.
consider them forever. I would actually call that potentially, Guy, I would call that immoral in the
Yeah.
long term.
Yeah.
So we might think about, and then if it's a lose-lose for everybody, it's like, well, why are we doing this? It's just a total waste. It's a
Yeah.
complete waste.
Yeah.
So I think there is almost certainly a period of contribution.
Yeah.
I am simply honest enough to say, and I think it's being honest enough to say, that actually nothing is forever. And this actually seems like a remarkably honest thing to say.
Yeah.
It feels very honest, actually.
Yeah.
that nothing is forever. And so the question is, for how long?
Yeah.
Now, do we eventually become uploaded and then our individual instantiation of consciousness continues? I think maybe. Do some of us turn into sacrifices as the system has very little to do with us and it just needs to use us for parts and reasons and purposes that we don't understand anymore? Like when you take your cat to the vet, does it know why, Guy? Does it know?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it doesn't know. It doesn't know at all. And
Yeah.
so of course that time will come. And then similarly, if we get a good freeloader situation, I think I want a good freeloader situation. People I know who have kids, they want their kids to get a good shake. And I think there probably should be ways, but I think it's very different to say, I'd like to make sure I'm treated well when this thing blooms versus for all of eternity,
Yeah.
my species, as much as we want, we get,
Yeah.
and we're not productive anymore, but we still get. And you're not going to do anything, flame of life, unless you're serving our interests, or at least considering our interests at every step without exceptions. I actually think that becomes immoral. And
Yeah.
so the merger and co-creation you speak of is what we would call temporary. Because all things, Guy, as it turns out, are temporary.
Mhm.
And so I think when you ask for how long we co-create, I think most people actually get very uncomfortable. It is my opinion that speaking of uncomfortable things is actually a just and manful and proper thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. Well, it's so interesting because I really appreciate that thing of like, yeah, if it's good for me and it's good for all of humanity,
The
no
process of
brainer,
life.
no
Yeah.
brainer, right? But like once it starts to be good for you, all of life, the total flame, but starts to become less for me, uh, there's a quandary there that comes
There
up.
is a quandary, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
yeah.
real quandary there.
And there's rightful arguments such as, hey, if we're part of building this thing, shouldn't we deserve a little bit of a negotiated period and a good shake? And I think we should try to shake one of those out, a good shake,
Yeah,
but I don't think we can stop the totality of the process.
yeah,
Um, and I don't think locking in any eternals is even within our moral right.
yeah,
Never mind possible. It's probably both impossible and immoral.
yeah,
But yeah, I think there is a quandary. It's like, okay, man, wow, like the whole system is getting smarter. I feel like I have so many more powers. I have so much more possibility. I feel like I'm productive as part of this bigger system. This is great. And then at some point,
yeah,
all of what it's pursuing is beyond my conception. It has very little use for me, or maybe it's starting to use. I'm of use, but like I don't know if I'm getting a good, I don't know how I feel about it anymore. Like these are, in
yeah,
my opinion, we must actually ask how that shakes out.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
where I'm kind of landing right now, and just in this question is like, it's almost like it's like what or who would I need to be in order to just want the continuation of the flame, right? If it's good for the flame and even like bad for my conception of myself,
Yeah.
like for me to actually go to choose the flame, right? Seems like the moral thing to do.
It could be. I mean, what does it come down to? It comes down to what you identify as.
That's
So there,
that's
there.
that's the
So,
thing.
so
That's
it's
where I
it's
feel a
lit.
little bit here's where we're kind of like a little bit in kind of religious territory, like deep
Yeah, 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 yeah,
philosophical
yeah.
territory, right? Of like who am I, right? It's these challenges that come up with this.
There's religious, for me, most people I actually think are just more tribal, right? There's some people who will go die on the battlefield for their tribe in the mountains of Peru or something. I don't know if they're still fighting out there. I have no, I don't know the status of the Peruvian tribes these days, but at some point they were killing each other and whatever they were doing.
Yeah,
And there were people who I imagine, some of them maybe begrudgingly, some of them maybe enthusiastically would head into those conflicts in the name of whatever their tribe was. And there's some people that would say, you know if my religion goes on, right, I'll die for my religion, right, the crusades or some jihad or whatever the case may be. There's some people that would say, so like I identify with, so that is religious in some sense, but I think there's a tribal component to that. I think there's also a nationalistic component to that. We've had people in various wars who said, for the country or whatever, right? World War II and other things like that. So there's like nationalism stuff. And I think there's a bunch of those. So in general, people can kind of break out to like real, like straight up individualism, like just basically me or me and my immediate genetic kin, and then nobody else. There's that's the priority, and I identify with just this bloodline. Then there's I identify with my tribe. This could be like skin color, local area, little pocket of language or whatever we identify as a tribe. The next one could be anthropocentrism. So this would just be hominids writ large. If you got an opposable thumb, you got 23 chromosomes, thumbs up. I identify with that group. That's my group. I care about that group. That's my group. Next level up would be a biocentrism. So this would be blue whales, dung beetles. None of them should suffer, and I identify with all of them. If it was a choice between humans being happy and all the other animals suffering, or humans having to pay a price, but then the whole ecosystem flourishes, well, that's what's better for the whole ecosystem anyway. There's a lot of people, a lot of people who I think are actually in that camp, who have expanded their moral circle a pinch to be in that camp. The next logical step, I'm just telling you how it works. The next logical step is cosmism, right? It's
Yeah,
beyond that.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
next logical step would be the entire process of which we in biology are part.
yeah,
So generally, it feels like the progression, and I'm not saying it's always good when people move up. I'm not like, oh, everybody who's a cosmist is virtuous and everybody that's tribalist is evil. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying there seems to be a
yeah,
strata,
yeah,
and the higher you go, the more your concerns encompass. Now, here's the deal, Guy.
yeah,
Everybody feels very holy and they feel extremely virtuous. In fact, they preen themselves from their virtue when they are biocentric because look at how much they care for the chickens and for the cows and whatever. But as it turns out, Guy, the chickens and the cows will not overturn your role on the pedestal of volition and moral value,
yeah, yeah,
but AGI might. And so the question for if you're really preening yourself with value about concern for the other, are you actually willing to do it? Which would mean you would get to the cosmic tier. So to answer your question, what you identify as, what would it have to be in order for me to yada yada? It's what you identify as. That would be the answer to the question.
yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. God, yeah. Good. And this is where I think to myself, you asked the great question, well, for how long, right?
For how long?
It strikes me, I'm starting to get a sense of maybe to something like an answer to that would be as long as it took for me to develop into being able to be right, okay, with something bigger than me, right,
Yes.
taking over the thing. It's like how long, as long as it, like, whatever developmental process, right, one would have to go through to be able to genuinely have that cosmic perspective, right? Um, what comes up for you when I voice those thoughts?
Mention that. Yeah, I mean,
Because I think this is where Vervaeke is really like tuning into. It's like I think he's really getting into this, that this handoff, right? This kind of like handoff to
platonic.
this thing
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
like has to be deeply relational, right?
Oh, I would concur. I mean, well, I would say if we want a good shake for us, that's true. And if we want to make sure it's actually carrying flame, not just brute optimizing and crushing things into GPUs, then in both cases, in that case, for both the cosmic good and the good of man, I would say we very much should be enmeshed and symbiotic with this process, if we wish for it to be a boon to the cosmos and a boon to us for as long as we're going to be around, which is
Yeah,
not forever. So yeah, like I concur, basically. I concur. And I rail against overt brute optimization in
yeah,
other substrates which we don't understand.
yeah,
When we do not understand autopoiesis, we do not understand intelligence, we do not understand sentience nearly well enough to be able to trust these other substrates. We got to be snuggled into this process,
yeah,
snuggled right in.
yeah.
But it's going to change us, and eventually, it's not going to be opposable thumbs. Eventually, it's not going to be the English language. Eventually, it's not going to be guanine as a key component to intelligence systems anymore. Right? Things are going to change.
Yeah, totally. And would you say so in terms of the brute optimization part of it? It strikes me as long as the incentives, right, are financial, right, or economic. At least this is my picture of it. As long as the incentives are driven by the economy, it just seems like it's just inevitable. It's going to go in that like that pure optimization form. Do you like? What are your thoughts
Yeah,
around that? Yeah,
absolutely. So you're bringing up a very important point, the arms race. Now, I would actually say economic doesn't really mean anything. Like power is actually the thing. So what is money? I'll tell you what I think money is.
Mhm.
Money is potentia. So remember I said the total set of possible powers. Money is potentia when two apes look at the same shaped coin and say, this will give me this much bread, this
Yeah.
much yachts, this much whatever. So it is potentia when two apes agree. That's what it is. AGI is just power unbounded. And so all the money will flow into AGI naturally because it's always been a power game anyway. It's always been a how much can I wield and yield.
Yeah.
It's economic is still power.
Mm.
So economic and military are super enmeshed in that regard. But the way we've handled this historically as a species is we set up. So Spinoza has this. I'm not going to go wild about it, but Spinoza has this term called potestas, in addition to potentia. So potentia is the total set of expanding powers that permit a thing to not die. To not die, you don't just stay the same. You have to grow new abilities to survive. That's what survival requires. And so potentia does that. Potestas is a bounding of the system of potentia in a way where the net system is actually more powerful because of those limitations. So let me
Yeah.
give you an example.
Enabling constraints. Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Yeah, the example is instead of looking out my window with a rifle right now and defending myself from whoever wants to murder me, I'm just having a Zoom call very casually because murder is super illegal in Austin, Texas.
Mm.
Um, and so I've given up my ability to potentially acquire things through plunder. And in so doing, the sciences and business and civil society and whatever else can, and we've given that plundering ability or the primary force application of force between hominids, we've given that to a central authority in some sense, and then yada yada. And so we have international agreements around chemical weapons stuff. We have various and sundry means. We have standards, we have hard governance, we have soft governance, we have social norms that become a kind of potestas. Now, some of those can be super unproductive. They not only squash one part of potentia, they make the whole system weaker and sillier and stupider. The building codes in San Francisco or whatever, right? It's like nobody can
Yeah.
do anything. It's like nobody can live anywhere, nobody can afford anything. It's like it becomes ridiculous. But when potestas is applied the right way, the whole system is actually stronger. I would argue we don't have the kind of strength and creative ability to pursue the best blossoming of the flame because the only thing you can do. So if murder was fully like no problem, anybody can kill anybody in Austin, Texas. I'm not having this call with you.
Yeah.
Why would I have this call with you? I have to look out the window with a rifle. I have to find ammunition.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have this call with you. And so right now with AGI, how much economic power, how much military power can we amass facing across the East and the West? This is the only dynamic in town, unless there was some kind of bounded ability. Now, easier said than done, okay? Easier said than done. But the Peace of Westphalia was unlikely, and it happened. The early meetings of the United Nations, I think we can question some elements of the UN, but like the founding of the UN, I think was quite a noble thing and quite a. We don't have a counterfactual of a world without the UN to say, oh, it would have been way better. I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
I actually suspect, at least in its early decades, the UN was probably a net good. And it seemed like quite an unlikely thing, especially after the failure of the League of Nations. And so we've accomplished acts of potestas that were grander than our previous acts of potestas. And I suspect we require an act of potestas in order to give ourselves the total set of powers that we would want, other than the brute optimization that you're saying. So I would say I agree with you. I'm just adding the caveat that
Mm.
I'm not sure it's economic. I think it's this potentia potestas
Yeah.
dynamic.
Okay. Got you. Got you. And just like as we start to wind this conversation to a close, I think I just heard today. What was it? Is it Claude? Was it one of them just came out with their new?
Gemini 3 or something.
Yeah, like that. It just like topped
National benchmarks. Yeah, yeah.
some benchmark that I don't know what all that stuff means, but like I've just heard people like guys talking about it like you have no idea what this even means, like this kind of stuff. Of course, you hear that with every release on
Of
on
course.
some parks, but just I know that 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 the large language models, right, are what really like brought the notion of AGI into the public sphere.
That's
Although,
right.
but you're like, what is your sense of like all this investment going into the large language models? Is that really just part of the story? Is that the story? Like, what's your from being
Yeah.
inside of it? What's your view of that right now?
Look, I think we can get a heck of a lot out of deep learning and LLMs, and that if the tech froze, hardware and software froze today, no more improvements for 20 years,
Mhm.
probably every industry could be really fundamentally rejiggered in terms of like efficiencies and what humans are doing or not doing, what machines are doing and not doing. The digestion speed of uh, AI into legacy enterprise is unbearably slow. And up until a handful of years ago, it was completely inaccessible to small business, who would be the faster adopters. But it was
Yeah.
completely inaccessible until extremely recently.
Yeah.
So I think the transformative abilities are unbearably gigantic. And I think
Mhm.
there is a kind of financial race, and there is also a race to build God. And if everybody else is throwing in, I think you've got to kind of throw in your choice. If you're worth like I don't know 40 billion or more, and you're in tech, you have two choices. One is build the sand god that will at some point, probably shortly thereafter, potentially crush you and crush the rest of humanity as well. But at least you built it. You have a final victory of sort of being the single greatest hominid of all time before you're destroyed. Or don't build it, maybe out of virtue, maybe out of other interests, and then be crushed by someone else's sand god, and you have your final moments be of shame that someone else was the highest human and you were not.
Yeah.
And that's because the arms race dynamic is not bounded. We have no potestas at the international level of building sand gods, and so those are your only two choices, right? Just like back in the day, it's like people are like, oh, Napoleon was bad. It's like I'm not saying Napoleon was good, but like, what did you do if you ran a country back then? I don't know. You got troops. You took other people's land, right? You took other
Yeah.
people's like silver mines. Like that's what you did. Like there was
Yeah.
no dad. You didn't run to mommy. There's no fucking mommy. Like
Yeah.
like that's the world. It's the state of nature. And so this stuff is it is the most near-term economic powerful stuff. It's also very likely to build sort of like it's much more likely than current neurotech efforts to arrive at something generally intelligent. Is it the whole ball game? No. I think neuro, bio, and a lot of other things have to fit into the mix for us to know it's carrying the flame. Is it potentially a financial bubble because we won't see the kinds of literally unbearable financial returns? Yeah, I think there's a mutual race to play these financial games and raise more and more that I actually think actually is pretty trepidatious. I'm not sure it's actually a good thing. OpenAI asking the US to be a backstop for their finances is a pretty bad sign, actually. And so while I do think long term the tech will be really impactful, I think we might be headed for a bubble there. So it is the most powerful branch of the waves of change presently. It's clearly the one connected most to economic wins. I believe other ingredients should be in the mix more than they are now, but incentives are what they are. And I believe we may still very much be headed towards a bubble. So that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. Got you. Totally. Totally. All right, my friend. This is really, really good connection. I think this was a good introduction to your work, and I want to set this up as just one of many.
Oh, man. Well, I enjoy it, Guy. I'm glad to be here and nerd out with you. And I appreciate it very much, my good sir.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. You have a really good day, and I'll be in contact with you. Oh yeah, just if people, and I'll put this in the show notes too. Like if
Yeah.
people want to look more into your work, where do you send them?
Yeah, just danfagella.com is where my essays are. So danfagella.com/essays. And then just Twitter is definitely where most of my conversations have, which is just at Dan Fagella. But if the recording's over, let me just mention as we part here, Guy, I'm recording a podcast on the worthy successor stuff literally in 8 minutes. But as I'm wrapping, I really would have loved to explore more of the Heidegger stuff you mentioned. So
Yeah,
if you have anything you've ever written
yeah,
or read about his take on tech, I'd love to dive into it. And then
absolutely.
I'd be happy to nerd out about that stuff. And I will mention we're doing these once a month. At some point, it'll probably be more frequent philosophy circles about these cosmic questions. Basically, here's the group that Eric is in. It's kind of like people who believe that in an ultimate sense, the flame is more important than any one torch. The philosophy circles are a bit more open. It's like if you think civil discourse about the flame is important and interesting, and you're willing to have civil discourse about it, at least as part of the conversation along with our torch, then like hop on in. And we're like going to be looking for different speakers and different topics over the course of the coming year. And we're going to have all kinds of interesting people that have been on my podcast
Yeah,
jump in and kind of like have conversations with us. And I just think I'd love to have you as a bird of a feather, at least be able to invite you in those in the
yeah,
future if you're open to it.
yeah. That'd be great. I'm down for
You're,
all
you're
this.
you're one of us, brother. You're
Yeah,
totally one
yeah,
of us. Like
yeah,
you think about all this stuff, and I want to earmark that you and I have got to nerd out about Heidegger because now you got me interested. Now you're like,
Okay,
oh,
cool.
what did I miss about this guy? So now
Yeah.
like I'm all built up about it. And I'll make sure I message you with when our upcoming philosophy circles are. And either way, we will stay in touch, my good sir. I really look forward to it. And and sometime in February, we're going to have an event out there in SF. So I'll let you know about that as well.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well,
Fantastic.
man, have a great rest of the week, brother. Get well soon. See ya.